Okay, welcome everyone to the webinar European Demand and Trends in Natural Food Additives. My name is Thomas Vonk and I'm working for CBI in the Market Intelligence team. As you can read on the screen, we cannot see or hear you. Please ask your questions via the questions tab on the right of your screen, the menu. Most questions will be answered in this webinar. And there will be a recording of this presentation, and that will be available in a few days after this webinar. It will be placed on the website, and if you're registered, we will email it to you. Also, the presentation of today will be shared. Okay, today's presenters are Teresa and Gustavo. They have written both market studies on the European demand and on the trends in the natural food additives. And when they start their presentations, they will introduce themselves. This is the agenda for today for the next 75 to 90 minutes. After a brief introduction of CBI, Teresa and Gustavo will start the main presentation on these subjects. They will talk about what drives the demand for natural food additives, the European demand, how to assess and how to forecast, what trends are shaping the demand and the future. And they will talk about the natural colors as an example for natural ingredients replacing the synthetics. And we'll finalize with answering your questions, which you can, during the whole presentation, just type your questions in the questions tab, and we'll come back to that at the end in our 15 to 20 minutes Q&A. CBI is the Center for the Promotion of Imports from Developing Countries. We're part of the Netherlands Enterprise Agency and are funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands. Our mission is to support the transition towards inclusive and sustainable economies. We strengthen the social, economic, and environmental sustainability of small and medium enterprises in developing countries, mostly by connecting them to the European and regional markets. So with that work, we promote and create decent jobs, and we pay special attention to women and youth. And we stimulate sustainable production and trade. And with that, we contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. Here on the screen, it's the goals 8, 5, 12, and 17, which is decent work and economic growth, gender equality, responsible consumption and production, and partnership for the goals. CBI can work in about and start new projects in about country, and that's currently mostly Africa and a bit and Asia. And we are active in 13 sectors at the moment. And today, of course, the natural food additive sector is central. CBI has two main pillars in their work. One of them is the CBI projects, and with our projects are always 4-year expert coaching programs where we train and coach small medium enterprises with the ambition to export to Europe. And we focus on sustainable production and export as a means to create decent jobs. And we always work on long-term sector development with the perspective of a locally shared vision. And if you visit our website, cbi.eu/projects, you can see what are the current projects, but also if there are projects that you can enter. In our projects, we work with all kinds of organizations, producers, government organizations, NGOs, international organizations, and of course, European importers. And then the second important pillar of CBI is the market information. We make market information available for small and medium enterprises in developing countries, and we focus on export to Europe of the products and services in CBI focus sectors I just showed you. All our market information is free and available on our website. The studies we make answer questions such as which country offer the most opportunities for a product or a service, what channels should you use to enter the market in your sector, and what laws and requirements must you follow to enter the European market. Please visit our website, cbi.eu/market information, and go to the sector you're interested in, and there you can find all kinds of studies that will help you realize your export ambitions. Thank you. We'll now give the floor to Gustavo. And so I'll make you the presenter.
All right. Can you guys please confirm if you can see my...
Yes, I can see your screen.
Yeah. No menu showing. Everything's okay?
There is still a menu showing. Hopefully.
Let me do this.
It has disappeared.
Yes, I know what to do now. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar and for your interest in this very interesting subject, which is natural food additives. As you guys know, it's such a diverse sector. I also saw, in the profile of the attendees, you guys are coming from so many different countries, from so many different industries, that it's really exciting to be presenting on this subject. For today's agenda, Thomas already introduced it to you guys. Well, we have the introduction to us, the market researchers working on these studies. And we are speaking a little bit about what drives the demand for natural food additives in Europe. So what are the main drivers and what are the main things to take into account when you're looking at forecasting demand also for the future? The main markets and products. So here we made a selection for you guys just to be able to talk about it in a more specific way. Trends and developments, and including some examples using natural colors in terms of natural versus synthetics and substitution, and then we go into question and answer. I just wanted to say also the purpose of this webinar is to highlight the main aspects that we have researched and studied in the natural food additives sector, but also to make it easier for you guys to read the studies. What you're going to find on the CBI website is a number of documents. Some of them highlight some general trends, requirements, etc., but some are really on specific product level. So it is a way to also make it easier for you guys to navigate the website in terms of what to find there. Just to introduce myself very quickly, I'm writing on natural food additives for CBI. This year, I have worked on other studies for CBI, such as spices and herbs, and I have been doing this kind of work for 15 years in the framework of different development projects, trade and development projects, and also work with some of the CBI's sister organizations like SIPO in Switzerland and IPD in Germany, and some other projects in the field for natural ingredients, natural food additives more specifically, a lot on trade fairs, a lot on actually researching the market in person and also in terms of secondary data. I'll give the floor for Teresa to introduce herself.
Thank you, Gustavo. Also from my side, a warm welcome. And just as Gustavo, for more than 10 years, I have been working now as a freelancer in various international development projects. Other than the study writing and developing strategies, as you can see listed here, my job actually leads me into great destinations, like maybe your countries, for example, and then I can mostly accompany the plant material along the whole chain until it reaches then the European market. So I am in close contact with both the producing companies and also the importers in Europe. And thus, we get all this information from both sides and the demands. And with this also leads us to our first topic of the day and of our webinar. It's what drives demand for natural food additives on the European market. So let's just dive directly into the topic and look at what consumers' demand looks like today. So in general, consumers want healthy food, but also they look more and more into mindful eating, which implies the awareness that there is a a story behind the product. So the pandemic has had a real impact on the eating patterns of all of us, of the consumers across all the countries, across all age groups, and also the income levels. There was a small survey among European consumers, and it presented that about like 50% of the consumers that were asked have as a top priority healthy eating. And out of these, 1/3 also said, like, I really pay attention to sustainability. So that can be, of course, from different angles, a lot of different aspects, but we look into this also in this presentation here today. So, but what does it actually mean when you say healthy food? So it means something from natural, from low sugar or avoiding sugar, substituting sugar, to no synthetic ingredients, no synthetic additives, and also less processing. When we look at this picture on our right side, we see the top 5 attributes of the clean label. So what is it that's really clean for the consumers? So it's not artificial, so it's natural, it's mainly fresh. And also it's a short list of ingredients. So not with a lot of ingredients, but really to have also on one side the clear picture of what is in the product, sorry. And it goes even beyond clean. It goes here even into this new direction of clear. So it means there is a transparent component to it. So where is the origin of the ingredient, and how is it then processed? In the end, it all goes down to the consumer's concerns over safety and the allergenic characteristics for the synthetically produced ingredients. So coming back to clean and free from anything that is artificial, that is synthetically produced, so that it's a safe product. And people really want to trust what is on the label, what is presented, and what the story behind the product is. So far from the consumer demand, Gustavo, what about the industry perspective, and what drives the demand there?
Yeah, it's interesting to see how also the industry responds to consumer demand and how the industry is actually organized around the different product groups. Because as you can see here in the numbers from Food and Drinks Association from Europe, this is 2018 data, but this has not changed dramatically, like in the last years. We see some main product groups that are actually developing in Europe, and also the main product groups that actually use the additives. So for instance, meat products accounts for 20% of the total turnover of food and drinks industry in Europe. You see a big user of food additives, also drinks and dairy products at 14 and 15% of the total turnover of food and drink industry. So what is interesting here is to see how the different product groups and the different industries within food and drinks in Europe, they reflect the importance of different natural food additive categories as well. And this is important to keep in mind when you guys are investigating demand and trying to forecast where demand is going, to see how the different product categories are developing in Europe and their importance in the total turnover of the industry. And of course, also looking at innovation. But when you're looking at the different applications, it's interesting to relate the importance of these end-using industries and how relevant they are for the different application areas for our natural food additive categories. So here, for example, you can see natural food colors. It's one of the product groups that we studied a lot this year. Actually, you guys will see that this will be published on the website soon. Natural food colors is used across the board on different industries and different applications in those industries. So you can see bakery and cereals, for example, dairy and cheese, meat, and increasingly the meat alternatives also using a lot of these natural colors. and even dietary supplements as well. Also natural sweeteners. You guys know that in Europe, and we're going to talk about this later, there is a big movement for replacing sugars for natural sweeteners or other alternatives. So you can see that in beverages like soft drinks, a huge category for sweeteners, and also energy drinks, bakery, of course, confectionery, and also tabletop sweeteners. You can see that there's a replacement going on there for these natural sweeteners. Natural flavors also used across the board. You can see here on the screen. And the emulsifiers, stabilizers, and thickeners, and the gelic agents also used quite a lot in soups, sauces, and dressings. Also in bakeries, in bakery products, in terms of the fillings, in beverages, including juices, etc., and also ice cream. So the applications are so wide and so big that it's also important to understand where it's applied and how the different end-use industries are developing in that respect. So that's where you can see how demand is related also to how these industries can be forecasted in the future. And of course, a big part of what shapes the industrial developments in Europe and also to some extent consumer demand is regulation. So when we're talking about European regulation and policy, it's important to understand what is going on in terms of legislative developments as well. So you can see that as part of the farm to fork strategy, which is part of the EU Green Deal. We've been talking about this for so much lately because we're trying to understand the impact of the EU Green Deal on the industry. It's important to understand the commitments that companies, associations are making in the framework of this regulation. So you can see that the EU Code of Conduct on Responsible Food Business and Marketing Practices, which is part of the farm to fork strategy, has the overall goal to increase the availability and affordability of healthy and sustainable food options that actually help reduce the environmental footprint. What does that mean? It means that in addition to carbon footprint, in addition to all these general goals that you have within this policy, also we are focusing on healthier foods, and companies and associations are making commitments in that respect. So you can see that this code was signed by 65 companies and associations in Europe in 2021, and they have to progress on a yearly basis on their activities. So this is quite a big impact because actually they're reporting on issues like sugar reduction, for example. And actually, one of the interesting things is that the Soft Drink Association is one of the signatories of this code of conduct. And as an example, it was actually the one sector to commit under the EU Code of Conduct to reduce sugar in their products. And as you can see here, this has a huge impact actually on how the sector is performing and in terms of also reformulation of products and product development. Just to highlight this in terms of numbers, the commitment of the Soft Drinks Europe, UNESDA, Soft Drinks Europe Association, is that the added sugars since 2015, they have been reduced in 18% in products formulated and in new product developments, etc. So this is a huge impact because the industry has made an overall commitment, and this has a huge impact in actually reducing sugars and finding substitutes such as natural sweeteners. You can see that stevia is an important substitution element here. And the big impact in the industry can also be seen in the overall numbers of no or low sugar or low calorie products. There was in the latest years a 29% market share in Europe of no and low calorie products, up to 40 to 50% in some countries. So this is a huge impact that policy has in actually fostering alternatives to sugar and also synthetic ingredients that are used in the industry. And I think the soft drink industry is such a good illustration of that here. Another illustration of regulation and policy is actually the restrictive regulation on food colors, so synthetic versus natural. And Teresa will talk more about this later, but I just wanted to mention how regulation on additives and specifically on food colors is so strong and so based on continuous safety evaluations that it does have an impact on substituting some of the synthetic colors for natural. So for example, just to illustrate, one of the synthetic colors that has been under discussion carmazine E122. It's a synthetic color that has been substituted in some of the applications for annatto, which is one of the naturally derived food colors. On the other hand, what you can see is that overall there is a rejection of additives in general, and even if they're natural, some of these food colors are still food additives. And a lot of the companies in Europe, a lot of the reformulation has been done in the direction of using more coloring foods instead of using food additives. So you can see more movement in that industry as well, in using more fruit, vegetables, and other plant-based natural colors to color the food and not necessarily having additives in terms of E numbers. So this is a strong movement that also European regulation has impacted on the industry. And also it's important to look at some fast-growing product categories such as plant-based foods, because they do drive a lot of the innovation in the industry, and they also have a huge demand for specific product categories within natural food additives. So one of the examples can be the meat substitutes, because they do require more complex solutions to make products look like meats, look more visually appealing in terms of looking, more similar to what consumers are used to, and giving it more color, giving it more texture that actually resembles the original meat products. But then these are meat substitutes, for example. One example that can be mentioned that you guys can research a bit more on is the solution found by Naturex, which is part of the Givaudan, that launched a product line made from beetroot and some other natural extracts, and which aim to achieve authentic, meat-like color in meat substitutes. And this is just one example out of many different examples that you can find in Europe, in European industry, where natural colors, natural food additives are substituting synthetic ingredients, but also where innovation is also driving the demand for these natural food additives in terms of enhancing the characteristics of those products. So product development, product innovation is a huge driver here for natural food additives as well. And now just to talk a little bit about some numbers, just not to let you guys be kept only with the general demand indicators. I wanted to give some general numbers, but as you know, for natural food additives, you have a lot of challenges to assess demand. Why is that? Well, because when you go into import figures, these figures are scattered across various trade codes. So it's difficult to get a grasp of the sector in one go. So you have to have the indication of demand by deriving this data from different products or product groups, but not for the entire sector. This is very difficult to get for natural food additives. And sometimes they're just not always specific enough. Sometimes they can indicate a product group and not one specific product that you want to research into. So you can find some patterns, you can find some developments in trade figures, but not always will you find the specific demand for your product. So it's also important to understand how you can get an indication, but not necessarily the exact demand for your different ingredient categories. And when you want to fine-tune and to forecast demand, it's also important to look beyond trade figures, looking at, as I said before, the demand drivers that we indicated earlier, and also other developments in the industry, such as the important end-using categories and other indicators that can help you translate the figures that you have access to. I'll give some examples. So for example, when you're looking at natural sweeteners, one of the big categories you can look at is glycosides, but the trade figures, they include natural and synthetic glycosides, and stevia is only a small part of it, or actually it is a significant part of glycosides, but you cannot know exactly where stevia fits into this big product category, which is then indicated by a certain HS code. But it's an indication, again, where demand is for natural sweeteners and specifically for stevia as being part of a bigger group of glycosides, okay? So for example, when you look at the data for imports of glycosides in Europe, you can get a fairly good indication of where demand for stevia is. And you see the two largest importers for stevia extracts as part of glycosides is in France and in Spain here. And what is interesting to say here is that these are countries that also have a stevia industry. So that shows that they are dynamic industries for stevia, and that also is an indication of demand for stevia extract. And here also we have Germany, an important trader, important food industry also, Ireland and UK. What is important to look at when you guys are looking at import figures is also to see the share of imports from these countries that are actually sourced from emerging economies. That shows that these are consisting of companies that actually go to the source and they work with companies directly in those producing countries. So France is a big one. 84% of French imports are actually sourced from emerging economies. From the UK, 62, and then you see that this decreases with the other countries. Germany, 51, Spain, 49, is still quite high, but Ireland, for example, 17%. This means that Ireland, for example, might source from other European countries. And the supplying countries from emerging economies, the main ones are China, Chile, India, Malaysia, Morocco here. China, India, Malaysia, huge extraction industry, so you can understand their position here. And I also wanted to do an exercise with you guys on the natural thickeners. You can see that here with the trade data, you can get some more specific information on natural gamma arabic and agar-agar, for example. Let's look at the main importers. You have France again, Germany, and the UK for gamma arabic. The importance of gamma arabic here is to understand the concentration of the industry. In France, you have a big company, Nexira, which is actually accounting for a big share of imports of natural gamma arabic in the world. So you can see that that reflects on the French imports having 95% sourced from emerging economies. So this is a huge share, and this shows the importance of France in this industry. Germany, 61%, UK, 59%. The main suppliers here, Sudan, big one, huge one, the main one, Chad, Nigeria, Mali. And then when we look at agar-agar, we see Spain, Germany, and France as being the main importers in Europe. And again, you see Spain as having 94%, but also acknowledging that Spain also has an agar-agar industry. So it shows that having a dynamic industry, not only is it a competition for suppliers from elsewhere, but it shows that it also has opportunities for suppliers from emerging economies as well, because Spain is sourcing 94% from emerging economies, Germany 54%, France 25%, coming from China, Morocco, Chile, Indonesia, Mexico. Similar exercise for essential oils and oleoresins. This is a huge product category. It's a very big product category that includes citrus oils, for example, to very specialized oleoresins and essential oils. And again, France, number one, just reminding you guys that France has a big flavor and fragrance industry, has a lot of houses, industries for that. And second, we have Germany here, also, again, a very big food industry, but also it does have a big trade role here. We have Ireland, UK as well, and Netherlands also having big industries for that, DSM, for example, but also Netherlands does play a big role in a trade for a lot of natural ingredients, including essential oils and oleoresins. And just to also say that for oleoresins, you do have an interesting role for Spain, which is Europe's #1 importer. Okay, so just as a subcategory here, you also have importers of Spain. The share of imports sourcing from emerging economies for France, 59%, Germany, 57%, UK, 47%, and then smaller shares coming from Ireland and the Netherlands. India, China having a huge extraction industry, as I mentioned before, Brazil, Indonesia, Argentina, Brazil, Argentina, of course, playing a big role in the citrus oils. In terms of the natural food colors, you can get kind of an HS code here that is specific for botanicals. So these are natural colors sourced from vegetable material, not animal material. But still, you see the importance here. Germany having a big role for natural food colors, the Netherlands as well with, DSM, as I mentioned earlier, and other industries. Spain having a big role for the natural food colors, especially, in the meat industry, etc. Paprika and things like that. Italy and France as well. Spain having a huge share of imports from emerging economies, 59%. Remember that Spain has strong ties with also Latin American suppliers like Peru. Peru has a very advanced natural food color industry. Germany, 33%. These are the big players actually here, sourcing directly from emerging economies. In terms of suppliers, in our emerging economies, we have China, India, Peru, Turkey, Mexico. Again, China, very competitive, India as well, having very strong food safety in their processing industries, very advanced industry, as well as Peru and Turkey and Mexico as well, coming here as competitors in this product category. This is just to use some examples and to show you guys how mapping out the market is so important when you're looking at the different product categories. But then it's also important to understand other indicators or the proxy indicators of demand. Again, the food and beverage industry can be a good indicator of demand. And as you can see, when you're looking at the different product categories for food additives, you can also see that this come up again when you're looking at food and beverage industries in Europe. So Germany, France, Germany, Italy, UK, Spain. It's also important to look at innovation. So one of the big innovators in this industry, plant-based food markets, Germany, UK, Italy, Spain, France being the big ones. So it's important to look at where you have some indicators and forecast of innovation in the industry. And here we can look at plant-based food market, for example, to understand where the market is going and how to forecast this. And finally, organic food and beverages. This is not to say that all the natural food additives are organic or that the organic is the main end user industry, but it shows the relationship between naturalness and awareness about organic food and beverages. And also innovation and companies, a cluster of companies that maybe is replacing increasingly synthetic ingredients with natural ingredients. So this shows a certain movement towards naturalness and towards a certain awareness of consumers and the industry. Again, a big role for Germany, France, Italy, UK, Spain. Not to also forget that these are the big industries, but also you have other countries like Denmark, Sweden, Switzerland in Europe that also have a big per capita consumption of such organic food and beverages, which are also indicators that these are important consumer markets, but also industries for natural food additives as well. I now give the floor to Teresa to talk a little bit about the trends that are shaping demand and talk about the future for natural food additives.
Thank you, Gustavo. Yeah, so we have heard now all the numbers, and going back to the trends and how it responds then in the end now to the demand is that we see on the European market. So the transparency is actually then two parts, the respond to the clean label trend that we touched upon before. So it implies primarily that it's clear where the ingredients are coming from, that it's clear what is on the label, that it's instantly recognizable and also understandable what it's written on the label. But as we go back the chain, let's walk back and see where it comes from. So the traceability is the buzzword here. So to being able to identify where the products are coming from and to trace them really back to the origin is here the wording, the important part in terms of transparency. And on the way back and going to see where it comes from, we see that there are a lot of stakeholders along the supply chain and the value chain. And of course, you have a lot of tricky parts where there can be challenges on the way. So it's important, and the good traceability requires the full transparency and to know who is involved, who is doing which step, under what conditions, following which kind of standards also, to mitigate and to alleviate the risks of it. So it's the risk management that is here intertwined with the transparency here on the different levels of the chain, but also when you look at the full chain, it's an important part. And last but not least, It's the legal content. So Gustavo already mentioned the European Green Deal, and at its heart, the farm to fork strategy, which is all about the traceability that then supports the sustainability. Also, we have the Supply Chain Act that is in the course of making or finalizing on the European level. For Germany, for example, it's already finalized. And this also goes back to transparency. So everyone buying in Europe needs to know where the products are coming from, who is standing behind the products, and who is involved in all of this. So when we have then look into also giving you some tips on this, please take a look at your internal traceability system. So the words are here: the batch identification. Do you know where it's coming from what location? Also, not to forget about the botanical identity, because there, when we talk about the different plant material, they can differ. They might be or similar, but they can be very different. So as an example, the natural colors. So we have the saffron, but there's a lot of complications, let's say, going on, because it's such a expensive spice that gives color, but at the same time, makes it also very much prone to fraud in the end. So it's really important to have all these documents in place. When you think about your storage, for example, is it clearly visible which product is what and where it came from, when it reached your storage, what kinds of processing stages have already done there? So this accounts for each bag in your storage or each bottle, depends on your product, of course. And can you trace it back to the previous location? So from which field the plant material is coming from, or from what collection area? So for achieving this, you don't actually need any kind of fancy barcodes, but it's also totally sufficient if you have an internal good system that uses paper booklets. So you can do, of course, the fancy way, but it's not an excuse to say we don't have the technical means. It's really also about papers, for example. Then the European buyers, and we saw this in the clean label that I mentioned in the beginning, are very keen to know everything about the origin, and also increasingly about the people that are involved. So we call it the social component. So to see who's there, what they're doing, how they're working, how their work also influences their personal life. So share this information, share the story of your product and of your company, and create transparency. And with this, you build up trust, and your partners in Europe, they can also use this information to promote their products, the final products, with the end consumers. Having a full transparency and the full documentation all along the chain counteracts the safety concerns that are increasingly coming up, because the awareness of the consumers and also the reality of adulteration and the mislabeling or unclear labeling has led to higher food safety requirements on the buyer side. So they want to avoid any recalls or put the consumer safety at stake. So they require increasingly more and higher food safety standards. This is one of the points here when we talk about the safety. On the other side, due to the very rapidly developing analysis methods, so with every now and then, no deeper analysis is possible, and also new pesticides and other chemical components can be identified with the always getting better and better methods. Also, legislation has then to take this step and adopt their thresholds and the official requirements, which entails then the regular changes actually in the EU legislation regarding the maximum residue levels and others. So also have always an eye on the latest changes in the EU legislation, because you cannot tell like it's every half a year or every year they will modify those numbers. It's really totally irregular in terms of time, but they can change even within months. Especially prone to this kind of, let's say, challenge are the oleoresins in our context, or other dried products for the colors, because they, due to their processing, they potentialize the components, and then also not just the wanted ones, but also the unwanted ones, and then they get more obvious, and then of course you come very close, or might come very close to the maximum levels that are allowed in the European legislation. In this respect, also the consumers more and more grasp the full picture of what organic means, that it's not just about environmental and ethical points, so in terms of sustainability, but also that it is a safe product, then, with less contamination, with less pesticide residues and other impurities that might come up. Not so much the label of organic itself is then relevant, but the fact that it's a safe ingredient or a safe additive, an additive that has an important function and that makes a small part only in this product that we are talking about, the final product in the end. But this organic additive puts a lot of benefit to the product in terms of safety for the finished product. And here comes directly the related tip to it, and it's that the international standards are not only a marketing tool, but they are a tool for risk mitigation strategy for you as a producing company, but also it gives the buyers the chance to calculate their risk, or to minimize their risk. Also look into the other direction of the importers to see what they need, what their requirements are in terms of risk mitigation, and then adapt your documentation and standards also to this one. Okay, and then we come to the sustainable chains and the alternative origins. What means sustainability actually in supply chains? We always talk about sustainability, but what does it actually mean? And I'm not going into detail here, but just to say it one here in a very short way. So it means the balance between the ecological, the economic, and the social aspects to maintain the resources, the natural resources that we are highly depending on in our context here, and also their availability. The agriculture production especially, and then the supply of the agriculture products, as well as the prices, as we see today very clearly, highly depends on the external factors, such as the climate conditions, the climate change, other circumstances, political context, the financial markets, what they do. So these changes and this global turbulences also cause, or might cause, unstable supplies and higher volatility. So this leads the importers now, and today more than ever before, to look for alternative origins. Before, I heard a lot from the importers, oh, we have our suppliers, we don't need anything, we are happy. But now, during the last 2 years, things changed a lot, and people are more open to have a plan B, a source B, and to be more diverse in this context. And then we also have to look not just at the importers point, but also the stakeholders along the chain, especially the smallholder farmers, for example. They, at the very start of the chain, they are at high risk for vulnerability. And they need to build up and understand how resilience works best for them, and what would be their way of coping with the challenges that are coming in the very near future. So we, on the importer side in Europe, we also have to support them in getting there, though the importers are more and more looking into also this local sourcing, but still there are products that are not growing in Europe and the vicinity of Europe. So we have to look also into the global. So I would say it's as local as possible what people and importers look for today, and as global as needed. And we came also in during our research across this new wording glocal. So it's a mixture of glocal and local. So people try to find a balance here to source the products as local as possible, but as global as it needs, because as Gustavo said, for example, the annatto seed is an example that does not cannot be covered within Europe, of course. So then when we look at another thing, what has developed within the last years is the demand for plant-based alternatives. So when we look at the years 2018 to 2022, the number of vegan consumers in Europe, so vegans, has doubled. It's an estimation of like 2.6 million Europeans consume or eat vegan, and this equals 3.2% of the total population of Europe. So it's quite a significant share. But it's not only about people living and eating vegan, but it's in general people try to avoid meat, find alternatives, plant-based alternatives, but also within meat and dairy and bakery products, natural ingredients and additives find a way and are more and more coming to substitute the synthetic products. So this also opens up a lot of new chances for the producing companies at yours and broadens the prospect for it. When we come, when we talk about new words like local or then this veganism, then we also come across circular economy a lot these days. It means for the companies and the industries to reduce their environmental impact and close the resource loop. We saw it a lot in the last trade fairs that people are more and more interested to see, okay, what happens actually when you do this processing of your plant part? What happens with the rest? What happens before? So when we look at the food part, so we can say that it can be more diverse. So sweeteners come not only from sugar cane, for example, but they come from stevia. They can come from coconut. So coconut sugar can be a good substitute. So diversification here. Then looking into lower impact, substituting animal proteins with plant proteins, it has much less impact on our environment. Then one of the main things is also upcycling. It means using the byproduct. So when you have a product and you have leftovers, so how can you use it? Either you use it for firewood, or you use it as a fertilizer, or you can even process it further into another kind of product for another application. And then it's this regeneratively produced. It means that it's the restoring of the nature. It's a different kind of using practices to nurture also the soil that we have. It goes into the direction also of organic agriculture. So there are a lot of things that end up and they go back actually to the old varieties and old versions of how to do and how to go on with agriculture. Without going too much into detail here now any further, because you can also look into it in our studies, of course, this is just to give you some more a different perspective, maybe more, and to give you some food for thought. Innovation and also thinking out of the box opens a lot of doors. So be ready to ask yourself the questions when we talk about sustainability and your way of production and processing. What is your way to amend your energy source for more independency? So are there chances, for example, to use solar energy? What do you how do you use the full plant potential? So maybe for all the processing and the energy needed, you can use the byproducts that are coming up within your processing line. Or then in terms of resilience, what does it mean for your company and your partners? So everyone has also different challenges in terms of resilience. So think about what is your way, how you can cope with the challenges of the near future. And then will this bottleneck that you identify then multiply in near future? And then again, what are your risk management measures? So for example, the water resources, if you depend highly on water, so is it something that you can also sustain in the next years, or do you have to look for other alternatives, how to clean your products, how to do your processing, and also going to the very beginning of your chain, can the products actually grow without or with less water than you have now available? So with this, we come to the next slide, and this is already our example that we also have what's it called? A news item written about the natural colors. So substituting the synthetical ingredients with natural. So again, we come back to the clean label of the natural ingredients. It's not just a trend as such, but it's also like a symptom, you could say, of the wish to eat healthier and to have a very transparent food, and that you know where it comes from, where the parts are coming from, and then what is actually in there. Clean label, as we discussed earlier, implies healthy and free from artificial additives and preservative, which means then natural, and which means especially for colors, this has been a big challenge in the last years. But with the innovation and with the new methods that are coming up and are developed, this gets more and more as a real and realistic use here. Not just the consumers want natural, but also the legislation. And as Gustavo mentioned before, the legislation forces more or less the industry to be creative, to be innovative, and to really give them the urge to do so, as they restrict very clearly what additives are allowed in the European or on the European market. So there's the European Food Safety Authority that evaluates regularly all the additives that are on the market, and then they can also put a ban on them, saying, okay, these are not allowed, or only allowed to this and this extent. So again, have here a very clear and regular look at the legislation to be always up to date what is allowed. Also exchange with importers, because they know best, and they know, and they can also give you some hints on what is there, how you also might need to adapt your products. And this is leading to an increase of this fruit and vegetable and other plant-based alternatives. So it's what Gustavo said before also, it's this natural food colors versus the ones that are coloring foods. So coloring foods is the one where you have the plants, the fruits, the vegetables turned into a colorant. And in the end, it's for the consumer, it's the most tangible way to get a hold of what it means, what they eat, because they could actually eat a spoonful of those kind of pigments. So they could just eat a dried beetroot powder, for example, and just eat it like this, or use it as a colorant in their food. For you now, as a supplier of these natural alternatives from these emerging economies, this is a unique moment and an opportunity for you to engage with the Europeans, the European formulators, the ones that are active in the food and beverage industry. Because this is now the time where everyone is looking for innovative natural solutions. They're looking for new origins. But the thing is, the most important thing is that you comply with the European regulation, and that your product, your additive, your ingredient is meeting every requirement in terms of performance, stability, safety, and also the sustainability in the way that we just discussed throughout the last minutes. Last but not least, we want to share with you the blueprint for success and the natural food additives in Europe. So share your interesting and your unique story. Point out what makes you unique, what makes your product unique, and it cannot just be the components or what it has in terms of performance, but it can also be the unique story, the unique people that you have, and the unique way of working. So share this with the importers and make it visible. A flawless safety profile, so to show the analysis of your ingredients, of your additive, the robust documentation. Sorry, I'm jumping a bit, but it's here in the sequence, so to say. It really shows with the safety profile and a good documentation, it fully covers your traceability, the need of the importers to understand what you're doing, where it's coming from, not just for them, but for your risk management, and also for the consumers to know where the products are coming from and what is in there. And with this and a reliable performance, a good communication, you can build up to be a sustainable sourcing partner for the importers in Europe. And now it's the time to do so. Best case, to show this full picture, as you see here also on the right side, how you do it in a holistic way, so that the nature can also cope with all the challenges in the near future. And with this, we are almost done with our presentation, to show you and to give you more also what's the word, articulated information, not just for reading it. And we hope that you found all this information interesting, and also as an incentive to look into the studies of natural food additives that are uploaded soon to the CBI website. And opening now for questions.
Yes, thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Gustavo. I've heard some very good examples and very good practical tips for all our audience. So, and we have a few questions. So I will go to the questions. And one of the first questions, right in the very beginning of your presentation already, Gustavo. So maybe the answer was already given later in, but let's come back to it. David from Uganda wants to know what the fast-growing product categories are in natural food additive sector, and where African SMEs can be competitive in exporting to Europe.
I think both Teresa and I can answer that, maybe from different perspectives. I think we see that aligned also with the willingness of product formulators to include those additives in the products. For natural sweeteners, I see here some sugar alternatives. The palm sugar, someone is asking me from Indonesia also. I think that's one of the, for natural sweeteners, that's one alternative. Of course, have the coconut sugar growing quite strongly in the sweetener category. I think some of this food coloring, as mentioned before, hibiscus, someone is asking me that also here. We see growth there, and some innovative ways to color food. Yeah, we see those as growing categories. Yeah, Teresa, anything that you can see in our conversations with the importers in the trade fairs?
Yeah, and actually they are quite also open for, let's say, from the European perspective, exotic ingredients. So they are also open for completely new ingredients that are coming up. So if you have something that you know is working and is not yet on the market, also take it to the trade fairs and talk with the importers about it and see, because it's everyone is open and always looking for new products too. So.
Maybe in terms of the ingredients, I think one thing that I was discussing with Teresa is the growth in, I don't know if it can be considered additive here, but like protein sources, alternative protein, vegetable protein sources also.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Gustavo, you talked about the alternatives for sugar, about the opportunities for low-calorie sugar, and we have a question: how about the palm sugar from Indonesia?
Yeah, in our sorry, Thomas, go ahead.
No. He wants to know if for palm sugar is one of the alternatives as well, and has it growing opportunities because of the sugar tax and all that.
It is a growth opportunity, but I think, Thomas, we have been discussing also how some of these formulations, they have tried to replace some of the sugars with some other ingredients, but consumer acceptance sometimes was, okay, we prefer actually not to have any kind of sweetener at all. There is still some issue with some aftertastes and some product reformulations and some consumer acceptance of some of these alternatives. And I think formulators are working a lot with that. So if you're able to have palm sugar, if you have the opportunity to go to trade fair and to show how it can be applied to different formulations and, I don't know, communicate this to formulators and show the potential, I think also buyers have to be educated about the different applications. This is one of the points. Ingredients do not only grow because there is a ready-to-use market, but also the market needs to be shown and convinced about the potential. So I do think that as a replacer, if you look at the market movement, there is potential, but there is also a potential that needs to be capitalized on by suppliers, by showing possible applications, by showing, as Teresa said, sustainability, impact, and performance, and also the different types of applications where this is possible. Educating buyers is super important as well to show the potential.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, there's a question about, I will read it out. Can hibiscus flower be used as a natural food colorant? And if so, in which industry and applications?
Absolutely, yes. So it's a colorant that is used in tea mainly. That's the main application for the moment. So it's always, when we talk with importers of tea ingredients, it's always the question because there are different varieties again. So we need to talk about the botanical identity and then what components also are and properties are there for the specific one. So when we talk about hibiscus, there are different kinds of, and they have different shares of this colorant in them as a component. So this is important to know what is there, what the coloring content is. So the very dark ones are the ones that are mainly required. And this goes in there as a full dried flower, but also then later when you dry it and powder it, for example, it can go further into other products such as other beverage products or into the bakery.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so product specification, super important here to have that documentation on the different components and the shares of the components.
Yes. Maybe for everyone here, the studies that Gustavo and Teresa have been writing about the trends and the demands, and they've been presenting now. They're not on our website yet, but will be published in about 4 to 6 weeks. And if you have a subscription to our market information newsletter, you will be informed about it. If you not have a subscription, go to our website and get your subscription on our newsletter. Another question. Jonathan is thanking you, Gustavo, for the figures in the European market. And he asked, I would like to know how does it reflect in the producer nations, and especially the farmers who actually produce these producers?
Very interesting question. So I think it depends on the country and how the supply chain is organized, because for the producers, like the primary producers, you have to see, of course, if you have the possibility and volumes and even the quality requirements to export directly, or if your value chain actually is more aggregated in volume at intermediate level, so intermediary level. So you have to see how your value chain works and how direct your contact can be to an importer or to like end using industry. So it will vary a lot, but I would say that it's also important to understand for each one of these categories how the market works. So for example, if for essential oils, what are the importers working directly in the source? And do this end using industries source directly or through importers? So when you're approaching someone that is actually a user of an essential oil, for example, or like a natural food color, you always need to ask that question. How much do you source directly? What are your volume requirements? What are your quality requirements? And then you need to see if you can comply with that. So the way that reflects on producers will depend on how the value chain works and how concentrated it is and how much these importers work directly with sources and what are their requirements in terms of minimum volumes, etc. So it's hard to answer, but I think it reflects in the sense that requirements, they are usually communicated vertically in the value chain. So if you have a requirement in the certain quality, for example, this will reflect on producers in the way that they produce, collect, and the way of primary processing as well. So this is important. Anything that is a requirement in the end of the value chain will eventually reflect on producers as well. In terms of market access is what I mentioned, how the value chain works. So it's difficult to say, to give one formula, but really studying and mapping out the trade flows and the market players.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Jonathan. He says we've seen traceability on the side of the European market. How does the European market increase traceability? How does the European market increase traceability to ensure that the grassroots farmers is not cheated by middlemen?
Interesting question. Oof, a big question also. Teresa, I give a short answer, maybe you can elaborate on it. We see more geographical, like GPS systems and actually mapping out farmers and buyers wanting to know even more on the contractual clauses and the types of contracts and prices that maybe exporters or processing companies are paying their farmers. So I see more questions in supply questionnaires on that than we have seen before, and a little bit more on the initial audits that they do with suppliers. So this is how it reflects that an importing company might want to choose someone that is more transparent, paying higher prices to producers and having more transparency and more reporting on that, more also traceability on where they are sourcing and which farming groups, etc.
And on the European side, this is also now becoming even more and more a requirement with this Green Deal and the Supply Chain Act that they're working on. So with this, they want to also from the legal side to make the imports that are not yet doing what Gustavo just mentioned, to make them and force them to do that and to get more information and be more interested in all these the parts of the chain before it enters the European market.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from Yanis. He says, we are growers and distillers of organic or oregano essential oil. Which is the best way to find buyers for our products as a food additive? Which is the best exhibition that we can visit, either as visitors or as exhibitors?
The next one is coming up in the first week of December. That is the one that is mainly for food and health ingredients. I'm really focusing on it. It's a nice trade fair that has just been merged. So before it was always food and the other year health ingredients. Now it's all in one. It's in Paris this year. It's from the 6th to the 8th of December. So this would be the perfect matching trade fair for you, but also, as you mentioned, organic. The Biofach trade fair in February every year in Nuremberg in Germany is also a trade fair that could be relevant for you to find buyers. And as you mentioned, as visitor or exhibitor, we always say, like, first come as a visitor and get acquainted and feel the vibes of a trade fair and understand whether your products match and what is there regarding the trends, and talk to some importers, getting first information on the market and ideas also and feedback on your product. And then you can join and come as an exhibitor if you're then ready for the next step.
Just a note here on Food Ingredients Europe, which is going to take place in Paris between 6th and 8th of December. And I don't get any commission from Food Ingredients Europe. I'm just, I'll be there. But just to say that they also have end of November to beginning of December, the virtual one. So you can still meet buyers, etc., even if you don't manage to go. Yanis, I assume that you're in Greece. Just hearing about the oregano and that with the name also, I'm assuming that, but it's a big assumption. If you're not able to go to Paris in this short notice to attend, you can still do the virtual one. In terms of market channels, of course, approaching importers at first, just to feel the market a little bit. And yeah, to get a little bit of benchmarking on how competitive your product is. And if your specifications are interesting, of course. Importers would be a good way to start assessing that. And users as well, but I think importers as a first step could be a good reference point for you.
Okay, and Jens, also we have on our website for the natural food additives also a 30 tips to find buyers. Many of the trade fairs are mentioned there as well. So, okay, next question. What do you think are the major problems European importers are facing while sourcing from emerging countries?
Oh my God, big question also.
Big question.
It's because it's so diverse, because some of them mention even communication. Asking for a quote and waiting 2 months to get a quotation, and sometimes not getting a response to the email. I hear this very often. And sometimes it's a yes or no. Can you supply? Yes or no, and how much and at what price? Sometimes it can be very simple, but the discussions can take too long. It's one of the things that I hear. And Teresa, maybe you can answer on the other things that you see.
Yeah, the communication is the first step, and it's always the first test, so to say, also for the importers to see like how reliable you are in communication, how reliable people also share information. And this is the first step also to build up trust in a partnership. So this is a deal breaker, and it's one of the main challenges that we see. When there's, even now in these last 2 years, it's coming down from, let's say, 3 days are the maximum to get a reply. Now it's down to 1 day, because with all this increasing digital use and everything, everyone is always online, and people assume that they get really fast information. And then not just about replying, but also really listening in and asking questions, what the importers also need. The other thing is the quality, when we also talk about the safety of the product. So to get really the documentation analysis valuable, not valuable, valid and good from a good laboratory. Mostly what we see from the countries of origin, there are no or rarely really good and internationally accredited laboratories on site. So it's always a bit of a hassle to get good analysis, but this is what it all comes down, especially when we talk about the food additives, where this analysis and the information about the components and the properties is essential. And then, as Gustavo mentioned, then the next one is, after the quality and everything is checked, also the availability and the logistics are today one of the big challenges. But this is not just on the top, on the surface of it, but these are the top.
But just to mention, also something else that Teresa mentioned that I think has been also in discussion is the standards. Sometimes there are buyers that have very fixed standards in terms of food safety, for example, they want suppliers to have. It's a dialogue, because sometimes you might have enough documentation to show that you comply with a certain standard without having necessarily the certificate, that buyers know this costs a lot. If the product is interesting, they could be interested in discussing a roadmap with you in terms of slowly complying with a certain certification. So of course, this will vary from buyer to buyer, but it's possible to have some dialogues, even sometimes if you don't have, I don't know, an FSSC 22000 for your processing facility, to document the steps properly and to show that you're complying with a certain standard, because the buyer still might be interested to work with you.
Okay, thank you. There's a question from someone who heard your story about the sugar alternatives, and she said, I know stevia and coconut sugar and other you mentioned, but she's also heard about monk fruit, and she asks, is it true that it has not been approved in Europe?
I have to look at that data. I can reply once I have checked this. I need to check with on the website, EFSA website. This is something we can reply later that we can check.
Yeah. Okay.
I saw the question flying out and I was like, this is something we can check.
And Manon is asking if there are additional price, what additional price are manufacturers willing to pay to substitute ingredients that are considered as food additives with alternative natural ingredients? Does it depend on the category of ingredients? Is it clear, the question like this?
No, because I think the question goes around when you substitute in reference to that synthetic original ingredient, how much more they're willing to pay. I think this depends on how much cost they're willing to absorb in their reformulation. So this, I don't know, it's impossible to give a figure on that, because reformulation means product development, which is an investment from a processing company. So it's hard to say, because obviously they would be willing to invest in product development, therefore maybe buy a more expensive additive or ingredient, but they also calculate that based on the forecasted return, meaning I cannot answer this question because it will vary a lot per company and per ingredient, per type of product where it will be used also. Okay, as a general answer, I think in terms of this product development, there are investments being made, so it is possible that they're willing to pay quite a higher price for a substitute in that respect, but based on return. That's an answer that I can give now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple of questions to go. Let me here ask this question from Eduardo. We are trying to introduce organic clean label lucuma as a natural sweetener. Great vitamin A level also. Is this something that's being used in Europe? So are there export opportunities for this product?
Lucuma has been seen in the trade fairs already. It is something that it's being discussed in some of the formulations, but I think what you need to see is in niche applications, how this might apply. You might not be able to start with the big product categories, but to really discuss on the niche applications and niche, how to say, processors and brands and things, that potential, but always with your product specifications, because it might not be familiar to some of these formulators. So I have seen in trade fairs, though. I have seen that there's some movement around it, but I would not be able to quantify it. But Teresa, I think you also work in that area, so you have seen some things maybe.
Yeah, but I can just also say the same thing as you. So you, in this case, there is still room for educating the importers, and this going into this exotic and new direction is really worth going for. But still, providing all the documentation and the information also for the importers, so they know where it can be applied and how it can be applied in the different contexts.
And with this additional health properties, as you mentioned, you have to just be a little bit careful with your claims, because you can have your specifications and showing the content, but try not to make too many claims that are not substantiated by scientific evidence. An importer or like a specialist will know when they read the specifications of your product what this is interesting for in terms of health also, but the actual claim is a little bit difficult to make at this point.
Okay. Let's see where if there are any other questions. From Godwin from Nigeria, what are alternatives for exports from Nigeria to Europe on branding and regulation? It's quite a broad question, I think. So.
There's a CBI program in Nigeria for ginger. That's one of the things CBI is working on in Nigeria. And I think there is a certain natural ingredient portfolio, which is an opportunity for Nigeria or any other countries to have a portfolio of natural additives, natural ingredients in general. So in terms of branding, in terms of marketing, I think having an industry and branding from a general perspective, like a natural ingredient industry, that's an interesting proposition from a country.
Yeah,
but
okay.
I wouldn't know if I'm answering the question.
Okay. And let's go to the last question and then close. We are growers and traditional processors of organic noni juice. What's the best way for us to get into Europe?
I would answer the same way that I answer about the palm sugar from Indonesia, like a similar approach to really go on application level to see where potential applications are and start having this dialogue with very clear documentation and specifications. In the case of noni juice, maybe there are different ways to process into different presentations possible for this. So this will also influence, right, like the potential application. So it's important that you have specifications and also possible presentations when you're speaking with potential buyers. Do research on the demand. So what are the possible applications? What are the players there? And what level of the chain? So can you speak with importers directly that are working with different categories, with other exotic, maybe juice items, for example, or formulators? So you can look at these two levels and start having your dialogues. And also, what I always think is interesting to anticipate where there could be demand based on your application. So if a company doesn't have that in their portfolio, can you anticipate they would be interested? And is it something that you see that it fits in their portfolio? That's an exercise that is always interesting to do as an ingredient supplier.
And then also to add, just sorry, one more thing is always to check whether it's a novel food or not. I think for noni there is, I have to double check, but there are some things going on, and there was something in Germany, but we have to double check that. And there's always a good thing to keep always, as I said, an eye on all the different changes and things that develop within the European Union, and also sometimes on specific country levels.
Thank you, Teresa. That's also a good tip when you go to our study on bio requirements in natural food additives. The novel food regulation is mentioned there. Yeah, so that's a good tip. So
can I
Teresa
just make, oh, sorry, Thomas. Can I just make a differentiation for some of the additive categories like flavorings, the colors, etc.? There is a separate legislation that you need to see if it's authorized even as an additive category. So you will have a positive list there. And you have the novel food, which is for ingredients, is separate a little bit. So one doesn't necessarily overlap with the other. So if you really want to use something as a food color, you have to check for specific legislation color. Flavoring is the same, so it will be a separate legislative sort of document.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to close this webinar. I want to thank Teresa and Gustavo for their very good presentations. And I want to thank the audience for attending this presentation, and I hope they will benefit from it. And yeah, just closing up, if you're in natural ingredients in general, in December 1st, we have a webinar on natural ingredients for cosmetics. Please visit our website at the events, and you can see more about it and already register if you want to. Thank you all.
You.